I first want to start off, see if you know somebody who really contributed something very important in our life. Somebody who contributed a lot. You don't know him? Wow. How about this? He's he's the one with the back turned over here. Does that help you know him? But he's the gentleman who became friends with Orville and Wilbur Wright. He was a mechanic genius. He left school at the age of 12 because he just loved doing mechanics and he didn't need to know anything else. Got a job in Nebraska at a paper company, journal, and he started out doing some things, but they finally just got him over to a place where he could use all of his talents and do things mechanically. Orville and Wilbur wanted him to come and fix something, an engine, which they could put on a plane and fly and live. See, there was a lot of people flying at that time when Orville and Wilbur were around. The problem was they weren't flying and living. And so he is certainly wanting them to come up with something where they can fly and they can actually land and they can actually go on with life after that. And he becomes famous just because he had that encounter. Now, not famous, but vitally important to our history because he just had this encounter with somebody, Orville and Wilbur Wright. And we look back in history, we see a lot of that, where a lot of people's life are defined by just the folks that they come in contact with, someone that they meet, that they just really, it just changed their life. For example, in 1874, Alexander Graham Bell met Thomas Watson, and they soon developed the telephone. Henry Ford in 1898 met Thomas Edison, and because of that, he would go on and start the Ford Motor Company. He actually said, I would have never started this company if it hadn't been for Thomas Edison. And there's many others. Matter of fact, just think about in our own lives, the people that we've come in contact to who made a huge difference in the way we live. Maybe the person you're married to, maybe a good friend, just anybody that you just happen to come in contact with, and that changed everything in your life. And for over 2,000 years, there is a man who has touched lives, more lives than anybody else in history. There is a man who, because of him, has made our lives different and they'll never be the same. That man, of course, is Jesus. In Luke chapter 5, Simon is going to be introduced. No, he wasn't introduced. He was going to have this encounter with Jesus. His introduction, I'm persuaded, took place over in John chapter 1. John is, the Baptist is out there, and he is talking about this one who is to come. And the day after the baptism of Jesus, Jesus comes walking down the road, and John points at him. And there are two disciples of John there with him that day. One we know was Andrew. We don't know the other person's name. But when John pointed at Jesus and said, that's the Lamb of God, it just fulfilled every hope, every dream that Andrew had. Those Jews who were called were looking forward to seeing the Messiah. They wanted the Christ to come. And so Andrew is the one who introduces Peter to Jesus, Simon at that time, of course. And Simon is a man who is portrayed in the film, and I think to some degree we can agree with that in connection with the Bible. He's a man who is portrayed that he likes to fix things on his own. He knows he can get things done. He kind of gets out in front, of other people. He takes the lead. I think that's why Jesus called him. And so Peter is portrayed here as someone who just steps out like he stepped out on the water. Nobody else did that. He's the one that also, of course, denied Jesus. That's not one of his better days. He's the one that pulled the sword and cut off the ear of the soldier when they were getting ready to take Jesus. And Jesus had to pick up the ear, put it back on. Now, you just think of that. If you were one of the soldiers and you saw Jesus just pick up the ear and put it back on and everything's fine, are you going to take him on in to be crucified? I don't think so. So Simon in this shows is someone particularly who in this video, and I think there's some truth to the video as far as his activities. He's someone who just would get so involved in what he's doing, and in this case, fishing, that he might put the most important things in his life into a second place. Let's watch this video.
I can't do this anymore. Please listen to me. I haven't been honest with you. There's no woman. It's not gambling. Look, a few days ago, I looked you in the eyes and I told you, I've got this. I lied.
What do you mean?
I've been fishing on Shabbat because I've had no choice. Andrew has text dates. I've got text dates. We haven't been able to keep up. I did some things I'm not proud of to fix it, and now it's gone bad. And we're in trouble.
We? What do you mean?
I'm in trouble. But we, because I need a miracle, or I can be in big trouble.
I'm not a child. Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me what's happening.
I could go to prison. We could lose the house.
What?
The cut in my ear, it's from a Roman.
Simon!
If I don't catch a ton of fish or get some help somehow, they'll arrest me.
Or kill you. They are Romans.
Yeah, so I need to go
Go
now.
where?
To fish. I gotta spend the rest of the week doing nothing but catch every fish I can and hope I can fix this somehow. So that's why we can't take your Ima. It's just not possible.
No, she has nothing to do with this. I would not let you punish her for your sins.
Eden, you can't do this alone.
Can't tell me what I can or can't do. You have had your eyes closed around here, and God is with me, even if you aren't.
Sorry.
Where is your faith?
What?
You heard me.
And faith isn't gonna get me more fish.
I'm not talking about tonight. I am talking about long before tonight. You've been different. Before it was gambling, and now it's working, and trying to do everything yourself. The popular Simon, fixing everything and charming everyone, all by yourself. And fishing on holy days without even thinking about it, with no respect for our God.
What about Pikuach Nefesh? We can break a commandment to save a life. Our lives are at stake here.
You don't know that, because you have not pursued the Lord lately. Not like the man that I married. That is why you are stuck, and you feel desperate, and now you're off to try to fix it yourself again. So go. I don't want you here tonight anyway.
I'm sorry.
I know you're sorry. I know. And I'm glad you're at least honest with me. But no more talking. Maybe God can get your attention now.
So you see a picture of Peter that basically says, I've got so much to do. I'm going to have to put God a little bit further back. He's got to be in second place for a while because I've got to fix some things. That's the portrait that I just saw. You got a man by the name of Sinus, son of Jonah, who just says, I can fix this. I can do this. So we can, I think, very much like Peter, I know I can, get so involved in the daily things of life and trying to make everything work, get everything fixed, that I sometimes can forget that that's not my greatest priority. I can sometimes, like Simon, not even be aware necessarily of what I'm doing wrong. I've just kind of gone down this path. I can fix it. It's just who I am. Don't worry about it. I got this. Oh, God, yeah, I used to go every Sabbath, but right now it's just not a time. I recognize we're in a different world now, but the idea is I'm just not putting God first. He's not putting God first. So I want to know, what are the priorities of our life? You know, in my life, I honestly can say that I get caught up so much in what I need to do that I forget about the things I really ought to do. I can tell you that we all ought to have a list of the things that are most important in our lives. And I have one. And at the top of it, it says God. The next one, it says prayer, devotion, Bible study. And I go on down the line. But I can get up some days and feel so busy, I forget to pray. I mean, I just get out that door, I'm gone, or I get down at my computer, I'm working. I can do this. I've got to do this. Now start focusing on things which are really secondary in my life instead of the things that are most important. This is what God says. If God so clothes, yes. Did I skip that one again? I'm going to have to learn how to use this thing. Jesus, a little bit later in Luke chapter 12, will say this about priorities in our life. Do not seek what you're to eat or drink, nor be worried. Anybody ever worry in here? Nor be worried, for all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and all of these things will be added to you. Okay, there's the priority then Jesus says we're to have in our life. He goes on to say, but if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow will be burned in the oven. If God takes care of this stuff out here, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? You got me again. Fear not, little flock, it is your Father's good pleasure. He loves it. He loves to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourself with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail. For where your treasure is, that is where your heart will be also. I wear an Auburn cap around every now and then, and they're not doing too well this year. And people will look at that cap and they say, why are you wearing that cap? Especially Alabama fans. Why are you wearing that cap? And I usually answer, for where your treasure is, there would be your heart also. I paid a lot of money for Nathan to go to school there. And at that point, I made, in living in Alabama and growing up in Alabama, at that point, I made a distinction between Alabama and Auburn. Up until that point, I could go with either one of them. Most of my family went with Alabama. But now, no, there's no going with Alabama. So we can get our priorities messed up because we're so involved, but we got to remember where is our treasure? We have to make all kinds of decisions all the time. And as a matter of fact, because we live in a world where we sin, we have a lot of difficulties, all right? There's a lot of things that come up, and that's why Jesus came. That's what I have to remember. He came to be the fixer. Jesus came to take care of all of those things that we can't take care of. And he can fix it if we will rely on him. If we will just trust him. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten up and gone to fix something. I don't know if I'm just confessing things that nobody else does or not, but I've gone to fix something a lot of times without saying a word to Jesus about it. Until a little bit later on, where everything that I've done has failed, I say, God, do you mind? So Peter is out fishing. He learns about Jesus from Andrew. I'm going to have to skip some things, folks, and you will be happy that I did. But Andrew introduces Peter to Jesus. He will go on, as a matter of fact, in John chapter 1, one of the two who heard John the Baptizer speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother, Simon, and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means the Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You will be called Cephas," which means Peter, the rock, the stone. And that led me to think a great deal this past week. Who was the first person that led me to Jesus? Who was the first person that introduced me to Jesus? If I ask you to think about that, who was that person? Because that person made all the difference in my life, in my eternity. That person, for many of us, it was our parents. And I think it's good that it was so, because, you look at the Jewish history, and the parents were always told to pass this down to their children. And when they didn't, the children went astray. So my parents, my mother, did a great job of teaching me about Jesus. And I wonder, who is the person that taught you about Jesus? And sometimes, Gigi, I didn't tell you this, but I'm going to have to do it. Sometimes I listen to things like Gigi says about her conversion. And I say, honestly, I wish that would have been me. Do I really? No. Jesus said, no. I don't. I look back and I think, my mother saved me by telling me about Jesus of all kinds of horrific things. And why don't I have a testimony that says, because my mother told me about Jesus, I missed out on all those terrible things. I didn't have to go through all those terrible things. I really think that's a pretty good testimony. As much as I'm moved when I hear Gigi and any other person, I just really think that may be critically important. So, Jesus wants to become our decision maker. With all the problems, with all that's going on in our lives, with all the difficulty, Jesus said, I come and I will solve your problems. I will take care of your problems. Listen to me. Follow what I said. So I get this picture of Jesus who made us, who came from heaven to find us, the one who died for us, who wants the best for us, and he just wants to be your decision maker. So when Peter This is something that I meant to say too. When we're oftentimes called upon to say, "How are you doing?" You know, we greet anybody. It's usually, "How are you doing?" I do merchant chaplain work and marketplace chaplain. I greet all these people and they, "How are you doing?" And I get all kinds of answers. A lot of them are day to day, nothing new. You know, we just same old, same old. And then I think about my life. What's happened in me? Why has Jesus made a difference in my last week? What are the things that he's let me do? When I think about that, I think about Larry McKenzie. Some of you know him or knew him. Well, know him. He's still alive, isn't he? And if you ever went up to Larry McKenzie and said, "How are you doing?" he would say, "Grateful, thank you." I was working at Highland Street with him. I didn't know him that well until I got there. I knew him, but every time he would say that, I'm thinking, what am I supposed to say now? You know? But isn't that a good answer for one of us who've been saved by the power of Jesus Christ? I'm grateful. Or Dave Ramsey, and I think anyone could be using some of these phrases, the better than I deserve. Am I doing better than I deserve? Absolutely. There's no question about it. I am doing better than I deserve because of Jesus Christ. So, in Luke chapter 5, Jesus is going to encounter Peter again. Now, if you look in Luke's account, the chapter before this, chapter 4, talks about Jesus healing Peter's mother. You remember when we were watching the video, there was a lady in the background groaning, and that was her mother. Not Peter's mother, but his wife's mother. And so he is not taking care of things around the things that are most important. So in Greek, you get this picture when Jesus comes walking, or when the boats come in, they see Jesus up there with the crowd. Now, in the video, that crowd could fit into this room. But that's because they didn't have the money to pay everybody. The crowd, they're in a town of 15,000. I don't know how many were there. But the Greek basically says that Jesus was somewhat claustrophobic. He was feeling totally surrounded by people who wanted to hear what he had to say. So he steps into Peter's boat, and he, without even Peter really telling him he could, they're off to the side washing their nets. Because tomorrow they got to go back out again. They haven't caught anything today. Tomorrow's the same old, same old. I've got to get back out. I've got to catch some fish. So I'm washing these nets. And Jesus steps up to him, gets in the boat, talks to the people. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing on to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. That's where Peter lived in Capernaum. And he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down, he taught the people from the boat. Peter is still over washing his nets. He's got things to do. Yeah, I know that Jesus is, I've met him and I know he's supposed to be the Lamb of God. But he's still washing his nets. He's not listening to Jesus. So, as a result of that, Jesus tells him, let's go out a little further in the boat. When he finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and we took nothing. Here are the words that are most important in my feeling of this whole passage. The thing that struck me the most, Peter said, but at your word, I will let down the nets. Peter is sitting there thinking, why in the world would he ask me to go back into the deep when I've been out there all night long and haven't caught anything? I know the fish are not, well, I don't know if they bit. I know the fish are not catchable. I know that. And he wants me to go back out in the deep and put my net down. Okay. But at your word, something that he learned about Jesus at that point, maybe when John was saying this is the Messiah, and Andrew told him that. Also, there's a question of whether or not Jesus healed the mother of Simon's wife, according to the chronology in Luke or Matthew, Mark, John. Oh, no. Anyway, he is now going to go out into the deep. But at your word, I will do it. We may say other phrases, if you say so, as you wish, in Princess Bride, one of my favorite movies. When I saw this, if you say so, or thought about that, I thought back to my parenting days. How many of you as parents would love to have heard your kids say, no, I don't want to, but if you say so? That just doesn't happen. You know, they can say, I'm not going to do it. I don't feel like it. I don't want it. But they don't say very often, because you say so, because you say it, because you say, go do it. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it if you say so. And Peter is probably feeling like that. I'm the fisherman. What I know of you, you're the carpenter and the teacher. I know fishing, but at your word, I'll go. As you wish, I will go. And they came and filled both the boats, so they began to sink. I don't know if I skipped some passage there or not, but it doesn't matter. So they go out, and Jesus says, cast your net on the other side. And I'm sure, again, Peter's sitting there saying, okay, that's what I've done all night. I have been casting my net on the left side instead of the right. And that's why I didn't catch anything. But they did, and they caught so many fish that both boats began to sink when he called over John and Andrew. So he fell down at the knees of Jesus and said, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, son of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. It makes all the difference in the world when he said, but if you wish, if you want me to, if you say so. That made all the difference in the world. And I want that to be something that we are saying. I want that to be a part of my life. I want that to be a part of your life. I want the obedience to Jesus Christ, regardless of what is going on, regardless of what I've done and tried to do on my own. I want us to say, I don't get it, but if you wish, if you say so, I will do it. I'll say there are many times in my life that I don't get it. I'd rather do something else or whatever. Jesus, if you say so, I will. When we do that, then I think of how many people heard the words of Jesus. Some of them just left. Some of them left discouraged. Some of them, though, accepted. Some of them just walked away, and then some of them walked for the first time away. Some of them were able to see who couldn't see. Some of them were able to work who couldn't work. You just name it. Who hear who couldn't hear. All those kind of things Jesus healed. And now, because of that, I want to be able to say, if you say so, but if you wish, if whatever you want to call it, if you want, that is what I will do. Some of those things are somewhat difficult. Some people walked away from Jesus because they couldn't stand what he was saying. So when you hear these kind of things, how do we feel? You're to forgive somebody 70 times, 7 times. Wait a minute. You mean this guy can do something to me 490 times, and I'm to forgive him? Yeah. That's what I mean. What if he said, as he did, I want you to lose your life for my sake. I want you every day to forget about you and think about me. Lose your life for my sake. What does that do to us? Love your enemies and pray for them. Oh, really? You want me to love my enemies? In other words, you want me to treat them as I should treat them, even though they treat me terribly? Yeah. I'm saying. Rejoice when you're persecuted. Hot dog, I just got beaten today. But if I've gotten beaten today for Jesus, I don't rejoice in the beating. I rejoice that I enough like Jesus that they knew it. That I looked enough like Jesus, talked enough like Jesus, acted enough like Jesus that they knew it. And they persecuted me. I can rejoice in that. And then we got to wash one another's feet. Are you kidding? Good night. Wash your own feet. There's a lot of other things we do for people that's worse than washing their feet, isn't there? That's what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching people. And when they bought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. That's what he's calling us to do. How can we catch humans? We might just show Jesus' humility. We can show Jesus' grace. We can show Jesus' forgiveness. We can show Jesus' priority. We can show and just share Jesus. Everything in this life is somewhat, well, not everything. Many things in this life are really hard to do for us. And all the things that God would have us to do are pretty difficult. I read one writer who said this, what Jesus was really up to. We are to obey God first and have to learn to disobey ourselves. If we're going to obey God first, we have to learn to disobey ourselves. Herman Melville, in his great book on Moby Dick, includes a chapter in it where there's this pastor who's preaching to the people, to a church, and the church is designed for sailors. The pastor says, all things that God would have us to do are hard for us, reminding them of the obedience God calls for us. And he says, that's where we got this point. If we obey God, we're going to have to disobey ourselves. We have to give up the control. We have to release the ownership. We've got to trust Jesus. We have to do what Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all of our heart. Don't lean on our own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. This is the journey that Peter was on, and he made it. Started off kind of bad, but he made it. And I hope all of us will too, who are here today. I hope we can bow the knee to Jesus and we can confess, I am a sinner. I'm with you. I mean, that's the first thing I thought, Peter said. You know, Peter said, this is, when I let down those nets, and the first thing I thought was, I'm a sinner. And Jesus said, don't worry. I want you to go. I want you to catch men. Maybe there's some people who want to bow the knee to Jesus today. Some of us who need prayers, whatever. Mark won't be out in the hall. I'll be out in the hall. Mark's going to be singing, I think. If you want to come and pray about anything, please do.